Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at how you can use OBS as an external video processor for things that you're doing inside of your vMix productions. So, before we get to that, I would just like to invite everybody, if you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to put them in the comment section below, and we'll try to get to them here on the show. Also, if you'd like to join us on the show and talk to us live here in the studio, you can give us a call through Live to Air on the call-in system we have here, and somebody in the studio will be happy to get you on. So let's actually get started here. When we thought about this, we realized that there are some things, while vMix is incredibly powerful, and even with scripting and everything else, there are some things that you just can't do inside of vMix right now. And one of the advantages that we have today is that we can have multiple components in our production workflow, in this case, OBS and vMix. And we can connect those components using NDI. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We have a vMix session that we'll use to actually produce and switch our production, our theoretical production here. And we're also using OBS then to do some very specific processing using something that OBS has that is incredibly powerful, and that's plugins. But not audio plugins, which vMix does have with the VST plugins. These are generic video processing plugins that allow us to do some really incredible things inside of OBS. So the one that we're going to be using in today's example for today's show is going to be something called StreamFX. And it is an incredibly powerful single plugin on its own. And it does like 3D video transformations. It actually does let you apply LUTs to your color lookup tables. So this would let you do things like do sophisticated color toning and tinting that would be sort of outside the space you'd normally get with just color correction in vMix. So very cool there. And it also lets you do blurs, and not just blurs, but blurs with masks. And so it's very, very powerful for a lot of things, and we'll dive into that. So really, the first example we want to show is something which uses OBS to create a virtual set for vMix. And it's basically using different layers with different blur levels applied and compositing that all. So, but before I jump into that, let me just check the comments here. So we have Rudy has joined us. So Rudy, always good to see you. We have Samuel joining us. Samuel, thank you for taking the time. We have KXO Radio. So yes, let's do this. Thank you. We have Peter from Berlin, and he says he hopes to be at NAB 2022. So we're rooting for an NAB 2022 as well. So we have Terrell, who's giving us a hoot hoot from Dallas. We have Guy, and he's basically telling us our audio is low, and so we're trying to work on this. So I apologize. I know we've been having some audio issues the last few days, last few shows. So apologies for that. So we have Terrell. Terrell says he thought it was his hearing aid. So no, Terrell, you're safe. So we have Thomas from Leverkusen. Hopefully I said that right, in Germany. So Thomas, thank you for joining us. We have Tom from Kansas City. Tom, always great to see you here. And we have Terry. So Terry, thank you for joining us. I appreciate everybody making the time here. So let's jump in. And probably a good place to start would be, let's take a look at the final output. So I'm going to just cut this out as the output from vMix, and we'll take a look at what we have here. So this is just there's basically 4 layers here. We have a background image layer. We have a layer with the television screen, sort of the frame and the monitor mounted on top. We then have a layer with the video image that's inside the screen. And then we have another layer, which is the talent that's talking and pointing back to the screen. So these are the 4 layers we have, but let's talk a little bit more specifically about how we did this. So let's start first in OBS. And in OBS, we have this set up with just these 3 background elements. And that is, as I said, the background, which is right here. We have the monitor content, and then we have the monitor in front. So if I just turn off the monitor content, you'll see that the screen is just cut out here, and we layer the content in, transformed behind this. The content itself is actually coming from vMix, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the way we did this is these images have all come in, and they were just basically stock footage we took off of Storyblocks, and we took and used this filter called StreamFX to add different levels of blur to create this sense of depth inside the composite here. So first start with the background. If I go in and look at filters, so these plugins are basically video filters. So we added a filter called background blur, and this is part of the StreamFX library. And we then have the ability to pick what type of blur are we looking for. And so we're using a Gaussian blur, and we're doing a subtype, which is area. And there are different types. So you can get linear, multiple filtering boxes. So there are different styles of blur that will give you slightly different results, but you can pick from them. And again, the way they are applied, with an area or directional. So all of these things are, different ways that you can apply a blur. You also get to sort of use the size. And so if we look here, as I move the size of the blur, it goes from 1, which is basically not blurred. You could go and make it like totally out of focus if you really wanted something that was sort of very deep depth of field look. But here we just had this set at around 8, which we thought gave us a nice intermediate look. One of the areas, and we didn't do this in this example, but one of the ways that this could be incredibly powerful is it also lets me apply a mask in using this, which means that I could decide what areas of this background image would get blurred and to what extent. So I could basically paint the blurring I wanted that actually lined up with the depth. So all the objects like the chairs right here and the front edge of this, those could have almost no blur, but I could make this entire back wall and these chairs much more heavily blurred. And to have that type of impact now, which would make this even more realistic. We think it looks good as a sort of a quick blur application. But if we wanted to create that real depth of field, this would give us an opportunity to have even more realism in this. So that's what we're doing in the background. The monitor content is slightly different. So the monitor content is coming to us from vMix via NDI. So we have a playlist we set up in vMix, which is feeding whatever we want to show in the monitor. And so we have a very slight content blur on this, just so it sort of has some level of separation from the host that we have. And what we're also doing is we're doing a transform. So we're taking the video that's being sent to us from this playlist in vMix, and we're sort of rotating it and scrunching it to get it to fit inside the frame of the monitor. And so, we're using a perspective camera, and It took quite a bit of tweaking to get this exactly the way we want it. But the fact that we can actually do this, where we have that subtle blur and the transformation here in 3D space, so you sort of can rotate things. So I could take in, if you wanted to, for example, create something like the Star Wars effect with the scrolling credits, you can actually take the image and tilt it in, expand it up, and then you could have everything sort of going out into a point in the distance, and even apply a blur so as things got off to the edge of the screen, that could all just blur out. So a lot of flexibility with how we're using this. This is just one example. But the fact you have these types of transformations and the ability to apply different types of masks to them is incredibly powerful. So we did that for that. And then for the monitor itself, we just have, like I mentioned, a very, very slight blur. So that's the monitor layer. And you can see it's just a transparent PNG. And for the filters, just a very small amount of blur in here for what we want. And this combined creates these senses of depth that create a little bit more realism with this. So what's cool here, and let me switch over now to the vMix interface. Uh, Here is the playlist that we're using. And so this is just everything that's looping through the, the playlist as videos. Each one of these videos, I can start the playing. So you can see now we have this coming in. And what this is doing actually is it's sending this out. One of the outputs is NDI. OBS is picking that up as an NDI feed, doing the transformation and the blur. And then in this composite, this is all coming back into vMix as a single composite. And we are then doing the green screen of the talent. So this could be sort of in studio talent. We're doing the green screen of the talent here in vMix, and that's composited. If I go over here, you'll see that I have this set up as layers where I'm taking in, I'm going over the feed that's coming in from OBS, and I'm applying the keyed green screen footage on top of that for the lady we have here that's doing the presentation. So as a collective set of processes, this is really cool because we're feeding the monitor and we're applying the talent here in vMix. The feed is going into OBS. OBS is taking that, doing the composite, doing the transformations in the depth, and then feeding that back in, and that's where we do the green screen on top of that. So there's round tripping going on, and there's this external processing. And these types of things, I mean, vMix doesn't have the capability to do a blur baked into it. And it doesn't have plugins for video yet. So that would be great to see that there. But this just gives you one use case for how you can do this round tripping using NDI to external video processing apps for some of the things that you may want to do that you just can't do alone in vMix or with scripting. So yes, so Peter just made a point here, and I want to jump in. So you do have delay, and this is not something that I was trying to gloss over here. For certain types of things, especially when you're doing video transformations and things, anything that requires significant video processing, the latency will go up. So this is not sort of a zero time processor, but you can use this in cases where that delay isn't significant enough to impact the production. So the fact that the talent is here and this is running out, you may turn around and say there could be a second of delay, but if this is for something where somebody's going through slides, that type of delay may not be that noticeable. And you have to keep in mind that not only is it doing processing, but we have the NDI round tripping too. So you're probably in each direction adding a few additional frames of latency just for NDI and then you have the processing that takes place. But I mean, that's a very good point. I'm glad you pointed out, Peter, because you have to use this in a selective way and make sure that the ways you're using it make sense for your production. And the other thing to keep in mind is if you want to make sure the audio is routed through the longest loop. So if you have somebody talking uh, and they're over on OBS and that is going through there, uh, you don't want to be taking that audio as a separate route if this new delay is going to be introduced. So you got to make sure that you keep your audio and video in sync with these types of things. But in terms of the general processing capability, something like a virtual set probably is a great way to leverage this, because even though you see the latency on the screen, to the audience, they just see the composite and they don't know that what's going on behind the talent, took place, 700 milliseconds ago or something like that. So you keep, you can make that work very well. Other things it just wouldn't work for. So good for pointing that out. So before I jump to the next use case, let me just catch up because I know there were a few more people so Guy's mentioning that our audio seems a little better now, which is good. And Thomas, the same. So Thomas said, yep. So good there. I'm glad everybody can hear us. Team 4M is just saying, giving us a hello from Munster, Germany. So Team 4M, thank you for joining us here. We have George Beast. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly there. Giving us an hello from Stuttgart. And he's also mentioning that this is cool that he uses a combination for overlay spectral waveform. So there's some cool stuff you can do with that. Especially where you want to do things where you would like to do like audio analysis. Doing that sort of as a sidechain could be very good too. So it gives you a good view for like loudness levels and other things inside the studio. So that would be a case where you can use that without having to actually reintroduce it into the production, but you use it as a support tool. So again, another great use case. So thanks, George. We have Mike. So Mike Graham is saying, so in this case, the talent would need a reference monitor to see the finished output, like a weatherman on TV. Yeah, I mean, this would work exactly like, your typical virtual set green screen, which is, what a weather man would be using, when they would be, talking in front of sort of a blank wall. You would need some sort of talent confidence reference monitor that they could have if you were doing this type of thing. But again, for some of these things, the two could be really disconnected. So this could be something where you just want to have a background which places the talent in a location for a production, but you may just be doing branding and other things where the talent isn't necessarily interacting with the background directly, or it needs to maintain that level of sync with the background. So in those cases, you wouldn't necessarily need to have that talent monitor there, but in most cases that's good because it's good for the talent to, if the talent feels they're immersed in where, the place you're virtually sticking them, it makes it easier for them to behave in a more normal way and to do things that would sort of be fitting for the environment they're in. So just a good way to sort of keep everybody in the virtual headset. So Peter is saying maybe OBS and vMix in the same machine to avoid some network delay. Yes, so we are actually running these on the one machine. So in this case, the NDI is probably the pretty de minimis in terms of latency back and forth. But there's still, I mean, you're still going to have at least a frame each direction just in terms of syncing them up. But yeah, I mean, it's again, like I said, it depends on the use case and it depends on what's being done. So if you're doing heavier processing on the OBS system, you could actually end up getting better performance if you had a bigger end processor doing just one thing as opposed to putting them on the same box and having that processor do multiple things. So it really would be something you have to look and see. But I think both of those could be, uh, you know, there could be multiple approaches and find which would work best. So so uh, so George is telling us his name is pronounced like baseball. So I get base. Okay, so George Base. George, thank you. Uh, so we also have Brulafu, just giving a uh, hello to everybody. So Bruce from Scotland. So Bruce, thank you for joining us. So let me show one more example, which I think is an interesting, though more of an arty use case to use OBS with. And what I'm going to do here is let me cut to this. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to be creating a sort of a vignetted blur uh, around myself. So here, let's take this full screen here. So you can see uh, I try to keep sort of the centerpiece in focus here, but then you sort of blur out of focus as you get to the side. You can see as like my hands go up, they're all blurred, and you can put this around you. So this has less latency because you're really just doing image processing. There's no video processing here. So this is something that it's going to be a little out of sync, as you can see, with the audio. But I think overall, this is another use case where if you were doing something like a church service or a wedding and you had different types of, like, say, a Christmas procession or something, you could do things like this now where you give that softer, more, ethereal look to it, and then switch back. So let's go back to the regular camera here, and I'll jump over to OBS, and I'll just show you what we did here. So in OBS, what we have is just two elements here. We have the guest video, which is just coming from the camera, and then we have an overlay mask. And that's all we have in this scene in OBS. So if I go here and I look at the filter, what we did here in this filter is we're applying the same type of blur we applied last time on the layers. But in this case, we're now using a mask. And the mask is basically just a circle with a black core that transitions over a gradient to a white outer band. And then we just are playing with the size of the blur we want. So if you look here, you can see I can sort of take the blur away, or I could make it really severe. But at a certain point, it starts to look like a hard break between the clear and the non-clear. So we just positioned it somewhere like right around here, which we thought gave sort of a nice soft transition. But this is not something, again, I wouldn't use this for audio sync because obviously we're a bit off with here unless you were delaying it somehow to keep it all in lip sync. But we think this is great for things that are sort of effect shots. And the perfect example would be, a wedding where there may be, a ceremony going on at a wedding. If you were live streaming that, this could be a really nice type of effect to apply that we think, could enhance the production value. So again, this is very simple, but all of these things, I mean, this is some of the capabilities you have here. If you're looking, you have, the ability to apply different masks and to actually, the mask could even be video, which would add to the delay, but you could do things that would be sort of softly moving all around the image. But this, again, just another use case example of some of the things you could do here. So let's just switch back now to the main shot. So hopefully this just gives you a general sense of some of the things that you can do with these types of outboard processing. And There are lots of plugins though for OBS, and I mean, so for instance, there are plugins that do things like face tracking that can move a camera. So you could do OBS, use OBS to take a camera feed from vMix, run it through the face tracking in a plugin, and use OBS to do PTZ control to sort of move the camera, or to actually have a zoom in, like something where you do like a 4K and a 1080 and have it move around there. There's plugins for all these things. So as you start to look at the power of plugins in OBS, I think there will be lots of creative ways you can figure out to apply them to things that will work for the different types of productions. So before we wrap the show today, let me just jump back to some of the comments here. So, Bruce from Scotland hoisted up a beer for us. So, thank you. That would not be a bad thing to be doing. So, Guy said that John is going for the David Hamilton effect. Yeah, thanks, Guy. But you know, George Bass made the point. He said it's great for beauty shots, and I think that's the sort of thing. It's something that photographers use, and there are actually filters specifically for that in photography. But it gives you those kinds of potential effects, and again, you could think of that almost like ice, and you put a window in front of somebody, like a window frame, and that you see the camera through that. So lots of different creatives uses that you could probably do for something like that, where that would give you that frosted look. But so let's see. So Mike was asking with that blurring example that you could work for a virtual panel discussion. We wanted to blur the face of the guest if they needed to remain anonymous. Yeah. So the quick answer is yes. Yeah, that could be something for there, but this would probably require, for somebody moving, sitting back, going side to side, you'd probably need to do something that would track this. But this potentially, and again, I haven't looked through all the stuff. This potentially could be something that you'd be able to do with camera tracking, where you could blur the center of the screen, in a rough space where the person's head would be. And as long as you could camera track fast enough using even an automated tool like a plugin in OBS, you could do something like that, where even if the person moved around, you just make sure that the camera tracks quickly enough so that they stay blurred through the production. So, that's especially if you're doing something live. So we have Torture CH says hello. Hello, Torture. Good to have you here. So again, I do not. I would do a very poor job pronouncing Cyrillic, but you can say your PC can use resizable far from NVIDIA. So right now we're not. I know that's in the RTX 30 family of GPUs, and we're running a 20 family here. But yeah, I mean that is possible that it could have a little less delay, But this is one of those things where we have to go with what's available to us, and the 30 series has been like a lottery if you're lucky to get one. But thank you for pointing it out. I mean, the resizable bar is an interesting capability, and it is something that vMix does leverage, and they've had some coverage of that. So George is asking, are there any plans for the vMix guys to implement a plugin system? I don't know. I mean, I have no real relationship with Martin, to where I'd get any type of inside information. But I think it would make a huge difference to vMix as a complete solution, because it would stop limiting it to the feature functionality that could be developed in-house at vMix, because they're a great product, but they're also a small company. So I, as another small company owner, I appreciate the limitations you have in what you can develop in a given period of time and still produce a quality product. So if you had something where you could open it up to an ecosystem of video plugins, uh, even if they had things that were certified for them, where you could go and say, okay, it has to meet these criteria, I think that would be great, not just for vMix, but for the community in general. You know, everybody could really benefit from that, and it would take and let the third party community fill in any gaps that people see in what they want to do in specific productions. So let's see. You know, so Bruce is saying the 20 family for the win. Yeah, that's right now. I mean, it looks like NVIDIA is actually going to be going back and releasing 2060s again with more GPU memory. So even NVIDIA may be getting on board the 20 family bus again. So JP is just joined us all. He said, "Hi, John. Great to see you again. Looking forward to the show tonight." So JP, thank you for joining us here. So I guess that's a wrap for today's show. I know it was probably, you know, a little off the beaten path for some of the things we do, but I just thought it would be an interesting way to showcase more of a distributed processing pipeline. Uh, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please stick around for the post show where we can talk about anything. And last week the post show was twice as long as the main show. So sometimes we get on some interesting topics there. So please, everyone that's here, you're welcome to join us for the post show here. And anything you know that you guys want us to cover in the upcoming season. So as I mentioned, we're next week's show is going to be our sort of final official show of the season 2 of Streaming Alchemy. Then we're going to have sort of one more show on the 24th, Christmas Eve here, for, you know, basically sort of an Ask Me Anything video show. Well, maybe show some stuff that I thought was cool to do, but wouldn't really make a full show. So, you know, we got 2 more shows, but we are really trying to put together an editorial calendar of what we'd like to cover in season 3, which will start probably right at the beginning of February, and that will give us time to get some of this stuff prepped, but still make sure we're covering the things you're interested in. So before you know, before we run, let me just see, is there anything? Okay, so why don't I'll cover everybody that still has an outstanding comment in the post show. So if I don't see you in the post show, I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody, and thanks for watching. Otherwise, I'll be back in a couple of seconds. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the post show. So I wanted to make sure, because we had a few more posts up there. So George mentioned that he does agree that, you know, they've already done this with the VST audio plugins. So he's talking about vMix supporting plugins in the architecture, and I agree. And I know doing, you know, a video plugin architecture probably has more challenges and would require, you know, some level of uh, significant underlying development to the way they process video. So I can understand why it might not be there, you know, while they still have the audio. But I really feel strongly that if they were to add that, that would basically put vMix into a whole new space that they could start to mine, and would allow people in the production space to do things that may not ever attract, you know, a normal product feature, but could certainly be, you know, applied to different specific niches in the production space. So let's see. So Brewster said he's got a question regarding an issue I've only just noticed, and he said he'll try to condense it into the chat. So yeah, I mean, Bruce, this is the time. So if you want to throw it up there, and, you know, we can talk about it, and if it's something that I don't have the information on hand to answer, it's something we certainly follow up with in any of the chats. So, let's see. Torture said, "Thank you for your work. We really appreciate it." Well, Torture, I think for us, this is a piece of something we look forward to every single week, and having this community develop the way it has been incredibly gratifying for us. So we're really grateful for all of you and everybody that tunes in every Friday. So, Jay Raphael said, "First time catching you live, and I'm on my way to the hospital." Oh my gosh! Well, Jay Raphael, please take care of yourself. I hope everything is okay, and if you're on your way to the hospital, I am sure you have more important things to do than watching this stream. So please be well and safe. So we also have, let's see, America Newscape. So he just said it was a great show, and he enjoys these post shows. I do too. I think sometimes with the post shows, you can get into topics that you wouldn't normally think of as part of a regular show, but sometimes the tangents are the most interesting pieces when you're having these types of discussions. So, Torture just says, "What's the main difference with the last iteration of NDI?" Okay, so there are a few things, but the main thing is the move to reliable UDP. And what that allows now is for UDP traffic to traverse lossy networks. That means that you can go over Wi-Fi where the signal may not be high quality and consistent. You could have it, intermittent gaps in that. And reliable UDP means that NDI can now traverse that if there is enough bandwidth there. It can traverse that even if the signal may drop in and out, because it can recover things that were lost during those dropouts. And that's the same for sort of the wide area uses now where you see NDI bridge coming in. So as a tool set goes, NDI Bridge is probably the most significant new tool that was added as part of NDI 5. But as an underlying component, we think the reliable UDP is really a big winner there. The other, though, is from the audio side, you now can use VST3 plugins to process audio in NDI. So we think that's another, it's brand new in NDI 5, but we think it's another big win for the NDI ecosystem to now have that ability baked into NDI itself. So very cool for that as well. So hopefully that gave you enough of a sense. But the NDI 5 tools are available. Definitely worth downloading. Lots of cool stuff in NDI Bridge. Probably beyond the ability to relay NDI over the internet. The next biggest thing is the fact that you can do basically transforms. So you're able to take NDI and convert it to NDI-HX. So it could be lower bandwidth and traverse maybe a wireless hop that you have in your signal chain. So things like that. So really cool stuff in the tools, as well as just a sort of a general upgrade of the overall NDI technology. So let's see. So Bruce is saying vMix desktop capture, Windows capture on the same device. When I capture the full display, video is perfect. When I select the specific windows to be zoomed in Teams, to be in Zoom, Teams, Chrome, it's jerky. Any ideas? I am not sure. One thing that's a possibility is that if it's not a normal like sort of video reference size and it has to process it, there may be additional delay in the way capture works that could make it a little less smooth, whereas sort of a 16:9 or a 4:3 maybe things that vMix handles in a more optimized way. I am totally speculating here. Uh, so yeah, we've used desktop capture for some things, but again, we haven't done it with any you know with anything sort of motion critical. It may also be that desktop capture really doesn't handle video, like full frame style video well, and it may be jerky naturally because you are sort of looking at a single video window and expecting 15 or 20 frames per second, and it may not be able to do that. So again, not sure of that. Uh, if you were capturing uh, these types of things, one way potentially, especially if you're doing it with Zoom, uh, one thing maybe to actually use like an NDI screen capture and pull that in as a single input and then cut that input up into different segments where you could go and sort of crop in. And so that would let you potentially uh, layer this in and create individual feeds for everybody in a way that might be a little more efficient because you move more of the processing into the computer doing vMix as opposed to where you're doing the screen capture. So just a couple of thoughts on that. If anybody else has anything, I would definitely appreciate it. So actually, uh, yeah, John Drinkwater just mentioned that it does take more processing to grab a window. So yeah, it is probably related to the processing and then to the frame rate you're expecting. It's probably some combination of those things that make it more stuttery when you're looking at it. So let's see. So Jay Raphael, who was on his way to the hospital. So I'm not sure why you're commenting here still. That said he'd sell his soul for a 30 series. If you're on your way to the hospital, why don't you hold off signing any contractual bargains for your soul, and just worry about staying well there. But I understand the sentiment behind that absolutely. So let's see. So Torch saying, thanks for the answer. So yeah, as I said, I'm not sure whether this is the answer, but just some conjecture here. So JP Nadet is saying, would love to hear some ideas on bringing wireless remote cameras into vMix, playing with mobile phone via NDI. So the first thing I think is if you're going to do something wirelessly, you really need to be in the NDI HX space. So that would be the first thing I would look at. So if you're bringing in cameras, make sure they're HX based. And the second thing which you mentioned is the reliable UDP. So if you're going with this, definitely look at NDI HX in the sort of the NDI 5 space where you do have that reliable UDP, because that will allow these types of things to work much better if you're doing NDI. That said, there are other wireless solutions for bringing cameras in. So I know Teradek has a series of wireless transmitter receivers that can work with the native camera signals as opposed to NDI, and then you could bring that in locally. And that could be something where maybe do NDI as part of the laptop, where you take the receiver converter, push that into NDI, and feed that in. That's another possible way to do this. But having that reliable connection when you are wireless, that's critical. And so that comes with NDI5, and it comes in some of these platforms. I think it's the Teradek Cube, and I'm sorry if I'm not remembering this, but it's not something we use in house here. But that would be one way to potentially another way to potentially do this beyond NDI. So let's see. So Torture says, for now, we are only using NDI for short connections at EBU in Geneva. We had some random fail in complex networks with NDI. So we still stick to stick to NDI between conference room and the Regier. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that term is, but I understand the sentiment that SDI. I was asked this question this week on a show whether I thought there was a future for SDI and what were the advantages of SDI in a NDI/IP world. And your point is exactly the reason NDI is still going to be around for quite a while. Getting network infrastructures to transport IP-based video streams, especially like really high quality IP-based video streams, uh, is not simple, and it is basically an area that's out of our control in a lot of cases. I mean, we may have a studio, but our studio infrastructure passes over potentially additional corporate infrastructure and generic internet infrastructure, and then guest infrastructure, if you're pulling them in from another location. So there are a lot of unknowns in doing, any type of networking. So SDI eliminates that. And you do get it's a digital signal, but you do get that point to point, screw the BNC in on both ends, and you're getting a signal across that line. So I agree with you. Uh, NDI itself is great, but it just requires the right infrastructure to really become your go-to solution across the board. And unless that's an infrastructure that you control fully, I would agree with your decision for a mission critical thing to go with SDI across those hops that you don't control. So so John Drinkwater just mentioned he has a Edachrone. Oh, I'm guessing you mean the jib. So now he needs to understand their API. So uh, Edachrone makes some really cool sort of dollies and camera uh, automated camera control for pan and tilt. So very nice things there. They also have a jib, so you can get sort of those big flying shots where you could look up at something and see it sweep down or sweep up. So very cool stuff on that as well. And they are computer controlled, so you can actually go and create these predefined movements for that. So very cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to see what you're doing with that, and love to see what you're programming with the API. So thank you, John. So Jay Raphael said he's a true dedicated Alchemy fan. Well, please, thank you, but be be well and be safe there. I definitely don't want you to do anything that jeopardizes your health here. Oh, that's Lee. Oh, Lee. I'm sorry, Lee. Thank you for speaking for Jay Raphael. So maybe maybe it's just a habit at this point, but we appreciate it. So let's see. So JP Nadet said, yes, it is the cube. So thank you, JP. I was trying to do that at the top of my head. Torture is saying Reggie is a studio or switcheroo. So, okay, thank you. I always love learning something new here. And so, no, so I apologize for my monolinguistic skills here. I wish my French were as good as your English. But so thank you very much. No need to apologize for your French. And I guess America Newscape is dropping off, so he just said, take care, everybody. So America Newscape, thanks for joining us. So if you have any questions, let's get them in. I just wanted to share one other thing that happened this week, which was really nice. On Wednesday, I was invited to join Office Hours, which, if you haven't seen Office Hours, it's something that's hosted by Alex Lindsay, who is one of the sort of at the pinnacle of the streaming community in terms of knowledge and the types of productions that he's been running. And so he had me come on and talk about our new live to air product and take questions from everybody. But that was a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen Office Hours, just look it up, Alex Lindsay Office Hours on YouTube, and you'll get to see what's on there. But it is a community of incredibly talented production individuals that have huge real world experience they bring and let people ask them any questions they want. So, very similar to some of the things we're doing here. But it was really fun for me to be a part of that and to get to spend some time. So if you haven't checked out Office Hours, every day, different shows. They're usually from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to I guess to about 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But great group, great community. And if you tune in on any given day, you're going to learn a lot of cool stuff. So definitely check that out. So let me see. So Bruce just threw out, he said, just gone up on my PC and may have figured it. I need to play with it more, but I'll be in touch when I know some more. Okay, please share, because I would love if you find out more to share that with everybody. And so Matt Wade just said he appreciates your content and have learned a lot as I try to become a video producer. Matt, this is a great community here. So please, if you have any questions, uh, just post it in probably the Facebook group. So the Streaming Alchemy group in Facebook has the most continuous traction. But if you post things as comments on YouTube as well, I try to get to them, but you'll get more of a community response over on Facebook. So I guess this is probably a good point for us to wrap the post show. So as I mentioned, we will be on next week. And so on next week's show, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the new live to air 12 remote guest channel neural net product. So we figured, we want to give, a little exposure to, the product that's helping us pay for this show each week. So this is something that if you're interested, we think it could be a lot of fun. We'll talk about things in more general terms as well. But we're pretty excited. This is a new product we're going to be launching in January, and we think it's got a lot of potential. So we wanted to share it with everybody here before we actually roll it out and give everybody a chance to see sort of what I do as my day job. So I hope you get a chance to join us. Oh, so let's see, just very quickly then before we have it. So George said good night from Germany. So George, thank you. Matt just made a quick comment. He says will do. He's moved to vMix from Ecamm. So Matt, I think you're gonna like vMix. I mean, Ecamm is a great product. vMix just opens up a lot more personality-based things that you can express in there that would be unique to you, unique to your productions. So I think you'll enjoy that a lot. So, so Mike Grabe had a quick question. New LTA with 6 guest version, will a 2060 GPU be sufficient? So the quick answer is yes, it will be sufficient. You do get 3 native encodes on a 2060, and you can do 3 additional software encodes for the remaining return feeds to the 6 guests. So you should be fine with that and a decent CPU. So probably like an 8-core CPU, and the 2060 would be fine for 6 guests without a problem. So we have Jose said, so he's saying thank you from Portugal. He's learned a lot. Jose, thank you. As I said, love having everyone here as part of the community. We have Kevin Michael Reed. So he said, bring your audio back into vMix and then send it out to your encoder after that. That's been successful for me. Yeah, Kevin, thank you. Yeah, this is very strange for us. I mean, since I know I was rapping, but I'll just throw this out. We're finding that the audio on our internal recording is fine. So we see these audio problems on what ends up getting encoded. So we're going to spend a little time in between the two seasons here trying to dig in and understand exactly what's going on there. So this, so, oh, I'm sorry. So, I didn't, oh, I'm just been told that you're responding to somebody else, but my, my apologies. Because we're talking about the audio issue we were having in the beginning. So, okay. So I guess we're at a good point to do a wrap here. So thank you everybody for hanging around for the post show, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.